Alright, let's start. 3, 2, 1, fight.
Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic. That's right, it is ARC's first event of the year, which means it is time for some fight recaps. Starting today with the A-League and Vogon Poetry, my overhead saw robot, now upgraded to basically help it survive a little bit better off of the last event that we were at. And if you want to see the upgrades, I have a video of that on my channel. It will be linked in the description down below. Also, I will say a big thank you to those of you in the comments of that video who suggested exactly what I've gone ahead and done here, which is an extra arm, the self-riding arm being pushed up to where the saw blade is rather than being so far down. This is a kind of case of great minds think alike. I thought about this while editing that video, so threw that together very quickly the morning of this event, and managed to get it all working on the robot, which is actually why it's in yellow, because I had already changed over the ABS in my printer at that time. So I just kind of printed whatever I had because I was in a bit of a rush to get to the event. Speaking of the event, there's a couple of quick little things here. So again, this is ARC's first event of the year. That is because we've moved venues entirely, and part of that venue change meant moving everything from where it was before to where it is now. And it was all a bit of an interesting thing setting up in a new venue, and some things didn't quite work as well as they should have done, which means that the pits are permanently open for the entire event. So every single fight, the pits started open and stayed open for all of them, essentially. So it meant that everybody was on a level playing field, but also pits were open for the whole time, which historically, when we've had issues like this in the past and the pits have remained open for the entire event, I haven't done particularly well. I tend to make mistakes early in fights, which are mitigated if the pits are not open at the time. Yeah, that's just a thing that has happened. Anyway, let us get on to the fights. And the first fight that you already know about is up against Hurt Feelings. This is Hurt Feelings version 2, which is an upgraded version of the robot that I upgraded Vogon Poetry for. So it was interesting to get into the event and have this be the first fight up, the rematch fight that I was looking forward to.
2, 1, fight.
So we got a win, but not quite in the way I wanted to. First of all, I will say that I was using my custom saw blades with the new keyed teeth on them, and unfortunately he has upgraded Hurt Feelings version 2, and it now has carbon fiber as its top armor, or I guess kind of bottom armor. It's the thing that he's mounting his brushless motor to, and he has used carbon fiber for that. And unfortunately, the stainless steel custom blades that I have made don't have good cutting power against things that are harder than plastic. So hitting the screws that were holding the motor in place and hitting the carbon fiber was really bad. I think I actually blunted a couple of teeth in those exchanges and didn't really do too much. There was maybe a little bit of scratching. Most of the actual damage that I managed to do here was around the edges of the carbon fiber into the 3D print that he'd built. But that's what they've always done. But yeah, as it turns out, they are useless at basically anything else. So I got a good pin, I got a couple of good saw moments on him to find out that this saw blade doesn't really do anything against carbon fiber, and then unfortunately he stopped dead in the middle of the arena. And apparently somewhere along the way in the upgrade process, there was just a wire on the switch that wasn't quite connected properly and it jostled loose. So we ended up winning that fight, and not really in the way that I kind of wanted to. I was really hoping for a big knockdown drag out fight there, especially as it was this kind of rematch off of Robot Havoc 4. Oh well, we'll get him in the next one and hopefully have a better fight with it. Up next, we have a fight against Double Smasher. Double Smasher is an overhead hammer robot driven by one of the youngest drivers in our league.
3, 2, 1, go.
So that was a quick one. We used the custom blade again, and again I managed to get one good pin and saw. However, I managed to pin and saw directly onto the servo that is right at the top of his robot, so did basically no damage because I was using the custom saw blades. And I wanted to change the saw blade over after this fight, but I had a very quick turnaround into the next one, mostly because this fight itself was very quick as I messed up. I was trying to corral him into the pit while he was spinning round, and I made a driving error. Plain and simple driving error, and whoop, straight into the pit myself. Told you I don't do particularly well when the pits are open the full time. I mean, it wasn't a great driving error, even if the pit wasn't open, but yeah, with the pit open, it was a very quick fight, and I lost that particular one. So as mentioned, we turned around immediately and went straight back in, and we went in against Brast Off, who is built by Steve, who is the father of Nate, who does Double Smasher. So it was a bit of a family affair, fighting them back to back like this.
Alright, let's start. 3, 2, 1, fight.
And it really was a family affair because they both won by getting me in the pit. Although, yeah, in Nate's case, I made a driving error, and in the blade tip fight, he just got underneath me and then got me into the pit really quickly. I think what happened is I've got acetate on the front here, but I haven't bent it particularly well. So he's either got underneath the unbent acetate, or there is a gap right where the saw comes down. So he may have got right between that, because he's got one very thin metal wedge point right next to his blade. And I think he may have got me with that, which is a spectacularly good shot. The other thing too is that I completely messed up on my self-righting maneuver. As I was up against the wall, I should have been able to self-right, but I didn't have the arm down far enough, or up far enough, I guess, depending on which way you're actually looking at this. The arm was about here, which meant that the robot couldn't self-right. If I had raised the arm to about here, I probably could have self-right as he had like spun around to try and get me in the pit, but instead I had the arm to here and I was trying to like drive myself off the wall, which isn't enough to do that, which is why, yeah, it needs to go all the way up on the arm and be like that, and then we can drive into the wall and just get enough to do what we need to do. Yeah, so a little bit unfortunate, but that is the way things go, and of course with the pit open the full time, sometimes you have quick fights like this, which is, again, unfortunate, but them's the breaks. So, moving right along, we have the third in the family affair, as we fight Blade Tip, who is also built by Steve.
Alright, let's get started. 3, 2, 1, fight. Alright, let's
this fight, I did away with my custom blades and went back to just the regular Dremel blades that I've been using for a long time, which managed to do a lot more damage. And they did work really, really well. Very, very early on, I got a nice big pin on him and cut down really deep into the robot and got stuck in there somehow. I think it was the combination of cutting through a couple of different materials and getting fairly deep into both of those that got us all stuck. To the point that I couldn't actually raise or lower the saw arm or anything. We were just stuck. So we had to go for a bit of an unstick. And as much as that was a nice fun spot to attack him from, especially as I was close to wheel, and I really do like going for those wheels, especially on this particular robot, that unstick kind of spooked me a little bit, and so I started aiming for a different spot. And we kind of coming together, there was a spot where the saw was coming down right in the middle at the front of his robot. Now, Steve runs orange tape on all of his batteries, and I did see that the battery was up there, but I thought it was further over and running along where the motor was. I didn't realize it was fully up against the front wall like that. And I was cutting into there, and I was getting some sparks fairly early in that, but I was hoping that I was going to do in this fight what I'd done in previous fights against Blade Tip, which was cut through the power connector and disconnect the power from the robot and leave it there. I also did realize that being that was kind of close to the battery, that I probably really shouldn't be cutting there. So I was feathering a lot of those cuts. I wasn't cutting as deep as I possibly could have been cutting. And I was trying to reposition and get cuts on different angles, which is kind of what you saw, is that I got a couple of deep cuts in the middle fairly early, and then I moved over and was trying to cut in different places. And then, yeah, the thing with the geometry of both of these robots is they do kind of come together with my saw blade right on the middle front of his robot. And eventually I did keep cutting down through there, and surprisingly enough, kind of surprisingly, kind of not surprisingly, that was the battery, and I managed to get a little bit deep into the battery, and the whole robot was still going. It wasn't until a little bit later, when I got even further into the battery, that the thing actually finally gave up the ghost, let out a tiny little plume of smoke, and the whole fight was over. I have conflicted feelings about this, because on one hand, it's good to win a fight, but on the other hand, I don't really want to be going after people's batteries all the time. Like, I don't want that to be the thing that happens. I much prefer hitting like battery connectors and things, or hitting wheels. Hitting a battery is risky and dangerous, and yeah, not particularly good. At Havoc 4, the battery was a little bit clearer because the top plate was kind of white, and it was a lot easier to see exactly where the battery was laying. And there was some discussion under that fight recap, because I did talk about the fact that at Havoc 4, I was asked by the officials not to hit the battery. And I agree with that. I don't think that aiming for batteries is a good idea. I was not really aiming for the batteries. I was thinking I was after a connection cable, especially with the sparks that were being thrown. So at the end of this fight, I did go over and give Steve one of my batteries, because yeah, I didn't feel good about the fact that I'd cut through a whole battery. Yeah, we did a decent amount of damage, obviously, in this fight. The top plate was fairly mangled after this fight, and yeah, there was a nice deep cut down that front wall right where the battery was sitting. So I'm hoping that if I fight Blade Tip again, that there is a better top armor situation for Blade Tip. I might actually take some stuff spare with me to help out next time round if needed, but we'll see with that. Anyway, that was the end of the round robin fights. We had our 4 fights for our round robin, and it was time to move on to the finals. And at this point, the pit came back to bite me again, because I was sitting on exactly the same number of points as both Double Smasher and Brast Off. And because I had lost to both Double Smasher and Brast Off, there was a count back, and I was not put through into the finals, unfortunately. So that is where this story ends for this particular event, or at least for the main tournament for this particular event, because as always with ARC events, we had a big rumble at the end. So let's take a look at the A-League Rumble.
All right, let's start. 3, 2, 1, fight.
Ooh, Hurt Feelings has got me again here. I think might be just a little bit of a rivalry forming between Vogon Poetry and Hurt Feelings here. Unfortunately, Hurt Feelings didn't have the spinner running because at some point during the day, their ESC had broken and they didn't have a spare ESC, so they were running weaponless, but they work really, really well weaponless. That whole design actually works very, very nicely, even as a wedge, which is really cool to see. It's nice to have some versatility, especially in a spinner like that. But of course, we didn't go down the pit without a fight. We pushed some people around. We did miss the pit once when Slipstream tried to get us over there. I did grab hold of Slipstream and put some nice nicks in the top armor. The whole robot, I think, is made out of aluminium, so it's fairly hard to get through, especially with Dremel blades. I would have needed to be in there for a lot longer than I was to get on in there. We also put some damage up into Chop Chop as well, which is another overhead saw robot, which was fun. I was actually kind of hoping that we got a chance to fight Chop Chop mono a mono at some point. Maybe in the next meet, we'll see. But yeah, there you go. That was a lot of fun as a Rumble, and this whole event was a lot of fun. It's good to get back into some fights. We are going to have more events. There will be a May meet coming up fairly soon, actually, and there will be more events on the way through. So if you enjoyed this one, make sure you subscribe to see the fight recaps for the next couple of events as well. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next video.